What's up everyone, and today I'm bringing a deck profile on my B.E.S. Now, B.E.S is it's basically a beatdown deck more or less, but it actually has gotten a lot better with the B.E.S, which can actually be played fairly well in this deck. So without further ado, let's get right into it. First, I run 3 B.E.S Blaster Cannon. Blaster Cannon, if your opponent controls more monsters than you do, you can special summon this card from your hand. You can only special summon Blaster Cannon core once per turn this way, and if this card is on a special summon, place 3 counters on this card. And at the end of the damage step, if this card battle, remove 1 counter from this card. It also cannot be destroyed by battle. So the cool thing with the B.E.S is that a lot of them do have that battle protection. And they each have counters or can get counters in certain ways. And whenever you attack, you remove a counter. And once you can't remove any counters during the end of the damage step, they will destroy themselves. Now this sounds like a pretty big negative, but it's really not, thanks to the boss rush. Because with boss rush, whenever they're destroyed, you can just replace them with another B.E.S. And if you have both the boss rush and the field spell, which the field spell gives your B.E.S monsters a ton of protection, basically they almost become untargetable, undestroyable, cannot be destroyed by battle, beat sticks. And with Cannon Core being one that can just special summon themselves from the hand, that's just even better. And I will mention we are playing a go into second build. You can go first with this deck, but it doesn't really get you much of anything because you can't really attack on your first turn. And basically what this deck is you get a big monster on the field and just keep on attacking. Well, the one weakness to this deck is that if the game goes into a very long grindy game, this deck will struggle a little bit more, but you do have ways around it thanks to the protection from the field spell. Also run 3 B.E.S Big Core MK3. Like your other B.E.S, if you control the monsters, you special summon this card from your hand in defense position. And if this card is normal special summon, you place 3 counters on this card. Now both these cards have that effect, which is really nice, so they're always going to start out with 3 counters, so you basically get 4 attacks out of each of them. And you're probably being like, but the duel isn't going to last that long. With B.E.S, you actually can, because what's your opponent going to do? Destroy them? That's not going to work. The only way around to get around this deck is non-target banish. That's really it. Because the field spell makes it to where they cannot be targeted or destroyed by card effects. They already themselves cannot be destroyed by battle. I also run 2 B.E.S Big Core MK2. Now MK2 is a little bit weaker than the first 2 B.E.S monsters. None of the rest of them special summon themselves from the hand, but thankfully the field spell actually does give you 1 to summon. If you control all monsters, you can normal summon this card without attributing, and when this card is special summoned, place 3 counters on it. So ideally you'd want to special summon it, but there's going to be scenarios where you can't, because if you don't have the field spell, which you run multiple ways to get to the field spell. So when this, if this card attacks or attacks, remove a counter. Basically, that's just how most of the B.E.S are. Whenever they attack, they lose a counter. But with boss rush, that's not really negative at all. If they get destroyed, they get destroyed. I also run 2 B.E.S Tetran. I also run the 2 B.E.S Crystal Core. It's got an additional effect to once per turn during your main phase, you change 1 face-up attack position monster your opponent controls on the field to face-up defense position. So if your opponent also has a monster with high attack, you can essentially just change it to defense position to attack over it. I also run the 2 B.E.S Big Core. Well, yes, it does say Big Core. It's actually a B.E.S monster now. The card text was updated to add B.E.S to the text, so technically the name is B.E.S Big Core, not just Big Core. Also run 2 B.E.S Covered Core. Oh, additionally, I actually forgot to mention this. The MK3 has an additional effect to you banish this card from graveyard, shuffle all B.E.S monsters from your graveyard into the deck, so it does got recursion. Next, I run the 3 Rebellion, 3 Magna Hut, and the 3 Bestial Baldrake. The Rebellion, you can discard it to basically add one of your Bestials, whether it be Magna Hut or Baldrake, and both Magna Hut and Baldrake have an effect to your target 1 light or dark monster out of the graveyard, banish it, and if you do, special summon it. And if your opponent controls a monster, this is a quick effect, which we're going second, so this is pretty much almost always going to be a quick effect. Now, Baldrake has an additional effect to if your opponent controls a monster. Yeah, if your opponent controls a monster and they special summon a Ritual, Fusion, Synchro, Exorcism, or Link monster, you contribute 1 other light or dark monster, target 1 of those special summon monsters, banish it. And we do run some darks, like the B.E.S big core is dark and MK3 is light, so we do have targets for this. You can also use your other bestials. And they're just really good at disrupting your opponent and getting another more B-sticks on the field, more or less. Now I run 3 B.E.S Zealous. When this card is activated, you can add 1 boss rush from your deck to your hand. All B.E.S monsters you control gain 500 attack and defense. Your opponent cannot target them with card effects. They cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. And once per turn, you special summon a B.E.S monster from your hand. And if a B.E.S monster is no more special summon to your field, place 1 counter on it. If you were to rank archetypes field spells on how well they support their archetype, this would be a top 10 100%. Because not only does this give targeting protection, destruction protection, attack boost, searches out one of your key cards, summons a monster, and gives it a counter on top of that. This literally does everything for the deck. So you are always going to want to see this card. If you don't see this card, you're going to struggle a lot more. But we have multiple ways to get through it, thanks to obviously the terraforming. Also run the 3 boss rush. Now, the cool thing with boss rush is that whenever your B.E.S monster is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you special summon from your deck 1 monster that includes B.E.S in its card name or big core, which all of them have the B.E.S in their name now thanks to the updated text. Now, while yes, your field spell does give your own B.E.S monsters targeting and a lot of protection, it does not protect it from your own effects. So let's say you dark hole the field. That will destroy your B.E.S monsters, but it will also trigger your boss rush, as well as the B.E.S monsters when they destroy themselves because they don't have a counter to remove. That will trigger the boss rush, and if you have multiple boss rush, it's not once per turn, so you can summon multiple monsters. Now it does have a bit of a downside, that the control of this card cannot normal summon or set, which is a bit unfortunate. I don't really know why it has a restriction like that, considering there is a B.E.S that does normal summon itself. But it's not really much of a hindrance because most of the time you are going to be special summoning it. I also run 3 Pot of Extravagance. Honestly, I had trouble deciding which I'd rather have, Extravagance or the boss or the Pot of Prosperity. I ended up going with Extravagance, but either or is kind of scenario which you'd rather prefer. I run 3 Dark Hole and 3 Regeki. Obviously, you don't really want to destroy your own monsters, but it doesn't really hurt you that much because you can just grab more from the deck. Obviously, if you don't have boss rush on the field, you don't want to activate Dark Hole and destroy your own monsters because you're not going to get anything off of it. Regeki is obviously really good because we're going second, so going second, Dark Hole is more or less just a Regeki. And for the traps, I run 3 Torrential Tributes. Just another card that's good at disrupting your opponent during their turn. And of course, boss rush, destroying our own monsters just doesn't really have as much of a downside. Moving on to the extra deck, I run 3 Barricade or Blocker. I run a lot of 3-ofs because I run the Extravagance. Blocker is a card you want to run at 3-of. You have to run at 3-of. If this card is linked summon, you can discard 1 card. During the end phase of this turn, you can add 1 continuous or 1 field spell from your graveyard to your hand. So you can either add your field spell or the boss rush. Both are definitely really good options, and you're definitely going to want to have access if they're destroyed. Also run 3 Plea for Genius. This link summon card is unaffected by spells or traps and the activated effects of other link monsters, which is definitely really cool, so Neopalosa ain't going to do anything to this. You can target 1 face-up card on each player's field, except this card. Both those targets have their effects negated. When 2 monsters are special summoned at the same time to the zone this card points to, you can add 1 level 5 or higher machine monster from your deck to your hand. And that does happen, actually. Let's say, for example, actually when I was doing test hens with this deck, this actually did come up, where I'd have 2 boss rush and 1 of the monsters. It'd run out of counters and destroy itself, and since I have 2 boss rush, I summon 2 B.E.S monsters, and I can summon 2 of the same name to trigger the Genius. Also run 2 Steel Star Regulator. This is honestly the first time I'm probably ever putting it in a deck profile. This card gains an attack equal to the combined original levels, ranks of the monsters used for its link summon, times 100. And all the B.E.S have high levels. They're all at least like level 5, 6, or higher. You can target 1 non-link monster your opponent controls with attack less than equal to this card, destroy it, and it's going to usually have a pretty good size attack. I'd say at least, well, maybe not a good size, but like maybe like at least 1500. That really depends. And if this card is linked using XYZ monster's material, inflict damage to your opponent equal to half the destroyed monster's original attack. So it can attack for a lot of damage and do a lot of burn damage, which is definitely really good in this strategy. Also run the 1 Nightmare Unicorn and the 1 Axis Code Talker to help close games out, although you're not really going to go into it all that often. Now I run 2 Photon Strike Bouncer. You do have multiple level 6s. Once we turn around, I play a turn when a monster effect is activated on your opponent's side of the field. You detach from material, you get the effect, and if you do, burn them for 1,000 damage. Also run the 1 Dragon Perrin. I just run it as an option in case the Strike Bouncer gets banished. And I also run 2 copies of Zeus. This is an all-around pretty solid card. What do you think of B.E.S? Do you think it's a deck with all potential? I actually think this deck could actually maybe someday see a little bit of play. Now, I'm not going to say it's going to become a tier 1 or maybe not even a road deck, but with the B.E.S seals, this deck definitely became a lot stronger. Let me know what do you think of this deck. Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the video I make. Bye.